One of the things that I always have to convince people of is that meaning migrates. Everything moves. There seems to be a resistance or a reluctance to embrace this. The closest a lot of people want to get is to say, well, change is the only constant. And that's true. But there's a level above that, which is the very nature of meaning migrates over time. It's a fluid concept in a liquid culture, if you will. So you see this in everything from the military. We're celebrating the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and that's a good thing to celebrate, but it also gives us an opportunity to say that the very nature of war has changed. When you hear the remembrance ceremonies for D-Day and landing on the shores, you realize that, like for instance, the last year of President Obama's presidency, we dropped 228 bombs in 17 countries. So war has migrated. What war means, the meaning of war has migrated. And so the war on terror, how do you know if you've defeated terror? It's an endless war. War, and thus the military, has migrated, what it means. You see this in religion, like for instance, the Methodism. Most people can't tell me what the Methodists are, who claim to be Methodists. And evangelicalism is my favorite example. Most people who try and define evangelicalism, like the best they can do is to say, and this is like from 30 years ago, if you like Billy Graham. But now we've got Franklin Graham. So people try and reclaim some European notion of evangelicalism from more than 100 years ago. And so they'll use like Bebbington's definition, but that's British evangelicalism. In American evangelicalism, so the very nature of the word evangelical has migrated. It means something different even than what it did when I was a kid. Masculinity is the same thing. The meaning of what it means to be a man has migrated. It's different than it was 1 generation, 2 generations, 5 generations ago. This is the nature of meaning. It drifts. This is something we have to embrace. We have to address it and account for it. Because if we continually try and resist the tide of change, and say, if we just got back to the way things used to be, or people are always trying to be originalists and saying, well, originally, blah, 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 whatever it is. And I'd say, well, if you want to go that way, but my favorite analogy is farming. Jesus used a lot of farming analogies. Look at farming. What it means to be a farmer has changed. We're not talking about a couple acres where you grow crops for your family, or even a farm or a ranch, right? We now have these mega industrial farms. The very nature of what it means to be a farmer has migrated. It has changed. You can 1,000 examples I can give you of this. You see it in politics. People try and claim we're the party of Lincoln. Well, a lot's happened since the 1860s. So even when people try and talk about Reagan, 40 years ago, conservatism meant something different. And you see this in a breakdown. Chris Hedges talks about this with the death of the liberal class. Like, things change and they migrate. It is the nature of meaning itself. So here's why I bring truth. Let's start there. Our access to truth is partial. We don't have all the information. It's provisional. It sort of changes over time. It's a placeholder. And it's perspectival. We can only see the world from where we are socially located. What that results in is that meaning is contested. We got to work it out together because it's not assumed. It's mediated. It comes to us through something else. And it's located. And so it's contextual. It changes over time. You see this in so many areas of life, and one of the things that I want to talk to people about is, so I've developed this 3-tiered sort of lens through which to view something, a diagnostic, is to ask, is part of the change affected by globalization, this interconnected world that we live in, a transnational world that we live in? Is globalization part of the change? Number 2, is technology part of the change? And number 3, are finances part of the change? Follow the money, right? So when you look at globalization, technology, and finances, especially within capitalism, you start to begin seeing how multi-layered things are, and that they all get pressed together, sort of glued together in a laminate. And it becomes really difficult to pull any one layer off or address any one issue because it's so complex and complicated. It gets pressed together and then it becomes one issue and it's laminated. So this is why when we try and address issues of race or class or economic justice, we can't address just one layer because it's so multifaceted. So let's use a couple of our examples from earlier. Look at the military. Is the nature, I said the nature of the military, of war had changed, right? That it has migrated. Is that impacted by globalization? Yes. That we are in more than 80 countries of the world we have bases in. Yes, the nature of globalization impacts the military. Does the finances affect it? Yes. Does technology affect it? Yes. Okay, so that's just a really simple example, and we can talk more about that. Let's talk about evangelicalism. Has globalization impacted evangelicalism? Yes, very global. Technology? Yes, evangelicals are early adopters of technology. First with the radio, TV with the TV preachers, the internet, right? They're very technologically willing to adapt and evolve. And then finances, is that involved in evangelicalism? Yes. Okay. Methodism. Has globalization impacted it? Yes. With the passing of the traditional plan, we definitely saw the impact of globalization. Is technology impacting? Yes. The dissemination of information and people feeling like they have echo chambers and clusters? Yes. And has finances impacted it? Yes. Part of the reason we're making the decision is what do we do financially with owning buildings and right? It's all the brick and mortar that would be impacted by that. So when you use this lens to say, does globalization impact the change? Did technology influence the change? Has it accelerated it, has it inflamed it? Yes. And then the finances. You always have to pay attention to the money. So just 3 other examples I saw in the news this week that I thought applied to this. I don't know if you saw the big crisis happening on Everest, cresting the tallest peak. So Everest isn't what it used to be, right? It used to be this really remote thing for just superior climbers and people who had the money, to do it. And now it's become an opportunity for a selfie. 11 people have died this climbing season because there are more than 100 climbing teams or crews or posses queued up waiting to ascend to the peak to get their opportunity to selfie so they can put it on Instagram. So let's ask, has Everest been impacted by globalization? Yes. Has it been impacted by technology? Yes. Has it been impacted by the finances? Yes. Check, right? Let's talk about China. So right now, people are really freaking out because in the past, like 100 years ago, China, right, Maoist, communist, then you had capitalism. But now we live in this odd world where China is actually the biggest capital market in the world, right? They dominate. And so has that been impacted by globalization? Yes. Technology? Check. Finances? Yes, of course. So when you see the panic and talking about governmental restrictions on trade, all of those things are impacted by this. The meaning of both capitalism and of what now communist China, the meaning has migrated. The last example is really fascinating. I don't know if you know that the Mississippi River is trying to change its course, but that our technology is being used by the Army Corps of Engineers to keep the Mississippi in its current route. It wants to migrate over to a different watershed, but the finances of doing that would be catastrophic for current trade. And so we are employing both technology and large amounts of money to try and keep the Mississippi running within its current banks, but it is trying to migrate over. So those are 3 examples from the news in recent days with Everest, capitalism in China, and the Mississippi River, meaning migrates. And so when we try to resist that, we run into all sorts of problems like Make America Great Again. But if we embrace this, the nature of meaning migrates, then we can have a different conversation about how to participate in that and how to harness some of that power to take it in a direction that might be more fruitful for the common good. Let me know what you think of this. Please let me know if you have better examples. If you have questions, comments, concerns, I would love to hear from you.